There are parts of Dark Souls 2's lore that don't quite add up. Unknown histories, certain character motivations, origins of the curse and of beings like the giants. These are unknown elements, and that's not really a bad thing. Just like in Dark Souls 1, these unknown elements will act as the gaps in the lore we fill for ourselves. In this video though, I want to question that lore. My best videos are based on interpretation, so before I do any interpreting, I want you to understand which parts of the lore currently don't have any concrete answers. I want you to know what topics need answering when the DLC hits, and I want you to try and find answers for yourselves. Let's make it a bit more fun though. Sometimes I'll engage in rampant speculation, and when I do this you'll see this little button light up. For example, did you know that Gavlan's wheel and deal quote is in reference to how he wheels Darkdiver Grandal around to get to different locations so that he can pay for his crippling alcohol addiction to Heineken? You can find shortcuts to topics in the description. We have 4 major topics, and the first one we're going to talk about is the opening cutscene. So, in this cutscene we have to answer 4 questions. Who are we? Where are we? Who is the woman? And most importantly, when are we? The most obvious question and answer is who we are. We are a wandering undead. It seems as if we've lost our memory of our past life based on the dialogue and the fact that these two are melting away. The second question, where are we in the cutscene? At the start I actually think that it's irrelevant. We're just a wanderer who comes upon this old woman. But it becomes relevant when we come upon the ruins of Drangleic. And considering these ruins, I think what's most important is when we are. The old lady tells us that one day we're going to stand upon the decrepit gate of Drangleic without really knowing why. This puts our actions in Drangleic in the past. So when we arrive at this portal, we are traveling to a kingdom that existed a long time ago, and that's where the entire game takes place, so that's significant. So, the next question. Who is this old lady to lay this prophecy upon us? Well, there is a 4th Firekeeper mentioned in the Firekeeper hut, a Firekeeper who left the others a fair time ago. I believe this cinematic old lady is the 4th Firekeeper, and that's for a few reasons. For one, she's wearing the red Firekeeper garb, but what's really interesting is that we have a lot of evidence that she's an aged Emerald Herald. Firstly, in the credits we're told that there is a young and an old version of Shanalot. Secondly, she has very similar dialogue to the Herald at the Dragon Eyrie when she says that we shall walk those grounds without really knowing why. And lastly, the Herald mentions that it was her own manifestation that led us to Drangleic. The Emerald Herald is also called Firekeeper in-game by Navlan, the Guardian of the Farfire, the 4th Firekeeper. The connection between the Herald and the aged woman has also been confirmed by people who are working on the official guide. So now that we know that the woman is an aged version of the Emerald Herald, we have our first question. Why is she laying this prophecy upon us? Why is she sending us back? The old women in the hut say, "You spoke to that kind old dear, didn't you? You're finished," implying that they know what the Emerald Herald is trying to do. Their dialogue also reminds us that they've seen other undead pass through here, all who've shared the same fate, hollowing. They have this air of disdain for what the Emerald Herald or the 4th Firekeeper seems to be trying to do. Their sister seems to be sending undead back to Drangleic through this limbo called Things Betwixt, perhaps in some effort to alter the past. So what past needs to be altered? If you've watched my video on the ending, you might know. Our character's goal in this game is to link the fire. The young Emerald Herald's goal is to get us to link the fire. The Emerald Herald tirelessly guides the undead who come through Majula, undead who appear to have been sent from the future. I've always thought that the Emerald Herald's dialogue sounded really tired and weary, and if she's had to guide hundreds and hundreds of undead along the same path to their hollowed fate, then that could explain why. In fact, this whole thing is actually somewhat reminiscent of how our character in Dark Souls 1 is sent back in order to stop the spread of the abyss with Manus. Think about it, the entire game of Dark Souls 2 is about the cycles. Things that happened in the first game in Lordran happen again in Drangleic. The framework is the same, but the players change. So just like in Dark Souls 1 when we were sent back to Ulasil to stop Manus and his abyss, we're being sent back to Drangleic in order to stop Nashandra spreading her own abyss. And that's my theory, anyway. Speaking of cycles though, a lot of you don't like the idea of cycles, and that's okay. Do bear in mind though that these are concepts much more accepted in Eastern mythologies than in Western ones. It really drives through that hopelessness of what we're doing, but if we are to see a Dark Souls 3, then I hope it deals with our breaking of the cycle somehow, because if we just get another cycle in Dark Souls 3, that would be pretty disappointing. So there wasn't too much rampant speculation on the discussion of this opening. I think a lot of this speculation can be fairly valid. If you find any loopholes in my theories, then let me know. Let's move on to something you can help me with though. The Giants. We'll start with the facts, what we know. Long ago, the Queen came to King Vendrick alone from a faraway land. She warned him of a looming threat across the seas, the Giants. It's not said whether they actually were a threat or not, but the king crossed the ocean, defeated the Giants, pillaged their land, and brought back a prize. So two questions come up with this topic. Who are the Giants, and what was stolen from them? And we don't have definite answers to these questions. It's an example of a really major missing plot point in the game. Ultimately, I think this might be revealed in some sort of DLC, but there are a few ideas floating around currently about who the Giants are, so I'll clue you in on some of my favorite ones and I'll let you make your own decisions. In terms of a timeline, we know that the Giants appeared after Nashandra came to Vendrick. She came from a far-off land and warned him of the Giants, calling them a looming threat from across the seas. My interpretation is that she used this information to get closer to Vendrick, giving him apparently vital information and conveniently placing her closer to the throne. Were they actually a threat? Probably not. Captain Drummond calls the invasion of the Giants misguided barbarism, and I'm inclined to believe it. If I had to draw a parallel to Dark Souls 1, I'd say it's similar to how Gwyn engaged the ancient dragons. So who are these Giants? Honestly, I'm just inclined to believe that the Giants are an entirely new entry to the Souls series, since there isn't really much evidence that they've existed in some other form in Dark Souls 1. One theory I do kind of like calls them a reincarnation of dragons. The ancient dragon drops a giant soul, after all, and while everyone assumes that the giant soul was a part of the dragon due to experimentation with Aldia, what if the devs wanted us to come to the conclusion that the dragon was a giant? This is further emphasized when you consider the plaque on the back of the Majula obelisk. It's cut content, but it says that the giants crossed the seas, perhaps to return home. So are they coming home to Drangleic? Since Drangleic is touted as being Lordran, who's to say that the dragons aren't coming back in some other form? The only other link I have to them being the same being as dragons is that giants grow into trees, and these trees could be the arch trees of the dragons in some sort of long evolutionary cycle, but this is a long shot. Also, in reference to the plaque, it could be talking about how the giants left Drangleic, not necessarily that they came to Drangleic. All it says is that they returned home, so since the obelisk is a war monument, I guess it kind of makes sense that they're commemorating the fact that the giants left, that they retreated, you know? Anyway, other theories say that they're the lords from Lordran, that perhaps this is the withered form they could take once they lose their souls. A few people noticed that the giant lord's outfit looked a lot like Gwyn's. It doesn't really explain why they grow into trees though, so I wouldn't say that they're the same race. And if Drangleic is Lordran, why would the giants be elsewhere? So as much as I'd love an explanation of what the giants are, it doesn't look like we have a solid theory just yet. Moving on, Vendrick brought a prize back from the giants when he invaded, and there's a lot of speculation regarding what this could have been. Whatever it was, it has to be related to Vendrick's ability to create golems, since Drummond directly states that he brought back a prize and then the golems materialized. So, some say it's the Lord Vessel, which is cracked in the basement of the Majula mansion. The Lord Vessel holds souls, and studying it could have given Vendrick the ability to place souls into inanimate objects. Another common reasoning is that this would explain all the Lord Souls from Dark Souls 1 being present in Dark Souls 2, though this is problematic reasoning for a few reasons. One, it's already been fairly established that Drangleic is a reincarnation of Lordran, so why would the Lord Vessel be overseas in the first place? And two, we know that Vendrick had already risen to power and defeated the 4 Old Ones by the time he attacked the giants, so it's unlikely that it's the Lord Vessel. Some say it's the Ashen Mist Heart, which allows you to delve into the memories of the withered. This could explain how Vendrick and Aldia peered into the very essence of the soul, though it doesn't really explain how they developed the ability to create golems. And some say it's the Throne of Want itself. I don't like any of these suggestions, but I like this theory the most for a few reasons. A, the throne seems built for a much taller being. B. You need the giant's kinship for the doors to even open. Kinship means to be blood-related or to share characteristics or origins. And C. Nashandra implies that she wants access when she bitterly remarks that Vendrick never sat the true throne, so it could have been the motivation for her to invade the giants in the first place. And D. The throne is surrounded by golems that only react to the giant's kinship. I don't think any of these opinions are definitively true or false. I think the intention of the developers was that you were never supposed to know quite what Vendrick stole, and this is what makes Nashandra's intentions so vague, and it's what makes the giant's intentions so alien. And once we figure this out, I feel like many other aspects of the game will fall into place. Speaking of Nashandra though, there's a fair bit that doesn't quite add up with her. So Nashandra is well known to be a fragment of Manus at this point. She also looks a lot like Dusk, who Manus both steals and releases in Dark Souls 1's DLC. If we follow this reasoning while we're on the topic of Dusk, we can assume that A. Dusk is Nashandra, and is more than just a damsel in distress in the first game. Her name is Dusk, after all, which means to grow dark. Or B. The fragment of Manus that develops into Nashandra simply gets an impression of Dusk. Or C. The fragment infects Dusk and grows within her. They're all possible and they're all interesting. I really like to think that there's more going on with Dusk, since her name seems to imply a little bit more. When we meet Nashandra, she's sitting on the simple throne, alone. No one quite seems to know where Vendrick is but her, with Velaga saying, "The Queen has taken him." That must be what it looks like to Velaga. The Queen tells you to visit Vendrick, then when he's dead, proclaims that Drangleic is no longer. She then tells you to seek the throne and do what needs to be done. So she's guiding you in the right direction. She's guiding you to the throne, aka the kiln, in order to link the fire. So why is she doing this? She says it's what must be done, so it's almost like she's given up, almost like she knows what's going to happen. And if the popular theory is right, there isn't much that she can do. Before Vendrick died, he locked half the kingdom away, behind seal gates only he could open, and then he shut himself away so deeply in the crypt that Nashandra couldn't easily follow. So we get to the end of the game, and we fight Nashandra. She tells us how we've proven ourselves to her, and how we will become one with the dark. Her intentions are still vague. The only conclusion that I can come to is that she led us to the throne, knowing that we were the only one who could get that far, since she couldn't. She then plans to usurp us at the last second, and ascend the throne for herself. The official guide says that she's found you, the new heir to the throne, so it seems like she's been waiting for a really, really long time. Why then are we able to challenge Nashandra over and over again in the throne room? Once we've lost, shouldn't she have already won? I mean, she's just standing there in front of the throne. Shouldn't she have the ability to ascend it for herself? And the only reasonable explanation to this is A, that it's a gameplay oversight, or B, that she can't take the giant's kinship from you, which means that she clearly knows very little about what the throne is, even after craving it so much. Her intentions are truly baffling, and I feel like there's something missing here, and I hope that there is. And then there's the ending cutscene. I've always been confused by the Herald's dialogue here. So there's this cycle where the Age of Fire fades to embers, and then it's on the cusp of becoming a Dark Age, and an undead comes along and links the fire, starting the cycle over again. So why does the Emerald Herald say that we're the one to break the shackles of fate? It sounds like we're staying within the strict guidelines of fate, doesn't it? In the ending cutscene, she says, "Once the fire is linked, souls will flourish anew, and all of this will play out again." She then goes on to say, "It is your choice to embrace or renounce this." Is she referring to how we can link the flame and choose an age of dark? Or is she saying that it's our choice to link the flame or renounce the cycle completely? And then there's the nature of the throne room itself. The Herald says that Nashandra covets the first flame and the great soul. She implies that these things exist within the throne somehow, since Nashandra comes here knowing full well that you'll take the throne and link the fire. So where are these things? Furthermore, do you think linking the fire takes place when you enter New Game Plus? Is this what the Herald means when she says that souls will flourish anew? I personally don't think she's referring to New Game Plus, but many people do. Anyway, that does it for major topics. In terms of minor stuff, we also have to discover what happened to Aldia. Who are the prince and princess of Alkan and Ven? Why is Ornstein here? We still don't know. And what's the deal with the Hired Knights? So if you have any idea on these minor topics, let me know in the thread in the description. And with this video, I really just wanted to drive discussion to these areas. I want to put up the gaps in the lore for public debate so that you guys are aware of what's known and what's not. I've got a link in the description to a place where we can discuss all these questions, and when all 3 pieces of DLC are out, we might just have to revisit these topics and see how far we've come. Until next time, guys.